Hello there, everybody, and welcome to week 2 of Midweek Momentum of 2026. And if you didn't tune into Midweek Momentum last week, you know we have changed. Well, you don't know, actually. If you didn't tune in to Midweek Momentum last week, you may not know that we have changed this format up ever so slightly. And instead of pulling from the genius of all of the guests who have come before today, and there are many, almost 250, actually. We're about to hit that milestone. I decided that I was going to use this as a time to talk to you and deep dive into something that came up throughout the week, something that may have come from this week's episode, or otherwise a way to encourage you to remember that the future of work is human, and we're going to make sure we keep it that way. Whether we want to be an AI-enabled human on purpose, whether, we are working in a fully human space, whatever that is, I want to spend this time with you deep diving and talking about the things that really matter in the future of work today. And something really interesting came up in my conversation with Vicki Landers on Monday. And if you haven't tuned into that episode, that full episode of No More Mondays, I really suggest you do, because she and I talked about perspective. And I think that this is such a huge thing in life in general, especially today. Society is not getting any easier to navigate. You can doom scroll for hours if you really want to and read all kinds of awful news and very little good. And so it becomes really easy to fall into what I would consider that kind of scarcity or negative or poor perspective mindset, especially when things happen directly in our own lives. It can be really easy to go, oh, I can't believe this is happening to me, or to take on that victim mentality, or to fall into that kind of scarcity mindset. Scarcity versus abundance mindset is very, very proven psychological activity. There are amazing books out there. Mindset by Carol Dweck is an amazing one to read about this. It's got scientific research, and also talks about how we can shift our perspectives and move to that glass is half full to maybe at least the glass has water in it. Because as we think about shifting perspectives, what we have to be cautious not to do is fall into avoidance. I'm going to stick my head in the sand and pretend like it's not happening. We also have to avoid the toxic positivity that's like, oh, it's all fine, and we just pretend like it isn't happening and sweep it under the rug. But there is a really happy medium and a gray space in between the I'm going to just be toxic positive and pretend like it's not happening and the oh, woe is me. And that sounds a little bit like this. How is this, instead of why is this happening to me, I'm going to challenge you to ask yourself how it's happening for you. Years ago, in the early days of No More Mondays, I had a guest named Michael who really leaned into that. He had a tragic bike accident that had left him physically pretty roughed up significantly. And instead of, victimizing it and just taking that as circumstance, he chose to turn it around. And for any of you that have read my new release, Scary Good, Discovering Life Beyond the Sunday Scaries, there's the shameless plug of the week. My book, which did debut as #1 top bestseller, new release in entrepreneurship, and it held that title for about the first 6 days, which is pretty incredible. This is something I wholeheartedly believe in and experienced. And so I talk very candidly and openly about some of the challenges that we have had in life, business, and finance. And I very easily could have just said, oh, this happened to us, I'm just going to go, be mediocre. Instead of saying, I'm going to take all of these failure, loosely translated, is a learning experiences and translate them into something that can help other people, or that can help us rise above our circumstances. But if you choose the lens of negativity, you're never going to get yourself there. It's funny how common themes show up for us. And I'm a big believer in paying attention to them, because there's no such thing as coincidences, and you better pay attention to common themes because they're trying to tell you something. And if you don't, eventually you're going to be smacked in the face to listen. And it's interesting that I chose to talk about this today, and that Vicki and I deep dived into this on Monday, because I also decided to pick up Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich and read that for the first time again. I've read it several times. I read it for the first time in a few years. And it really is central to this idea that if you put your mind to it, and if you commit, and if you have an abundance attitude and perspective towards it, you can actually achieve pretty incredible things. However, that's never going to happen if you choose circumstances as the status quo or accept what I like to call mediocrity, because that is something that we are all too accepting of in society today, instead of looking at like, what do I want to design? So this idea of like career by design instead of default, life by design instead of default. We have more agency in our lives and careers today than we ever have before. But because we're in the shift into that ecosystem, it is easy to just say, oh, I have to live and work the old way, right? The clock in, clock out, the 9 to 5, the pension retire when we turn 65, and then we get to go do fun things. Guess what? We now live in a space and a time that allows us to be entrepreneurs. It allows us to be digital. It allows us to say, this is what I want to do, and I am going to go seek it out and design what I want life to look like. If that is maximizing out access to the outdoors, that's something that we chose, right? That was something that we designed, and I figured out how to create a career that aligned with it instead of saying, okay, I'm just going to stay an engineer. I'll snowboard on the weekends, and when I leave work at 8 p.m., so exhausted, hopefully I can have time for a social life, right? I chose to live life outside of those tiny, tiny margins. And what I want you to know is you can too. And a lot of it comes down to perspective. And this came up again last week. We hosted the 3rd annual Job Seeker Summit last Thursday to a rousing crowd of over 800 attendees, which is pretty incredible and also pretty telling of just where we are in the current labor economy and what people need right now. And somebody asked the question, she says, what do I do? And this is really about the future of work and the perspective that we have as things change and also how we put ourselves in it. She says, I'm a graphic designer and I don't know how to adopt or embrace AI on any level because I feel like it is just destroying my industry. And all of us, I would say, kind of commiserated with her. The career coaches in my world who write resumes have been experiencing those challenges. And there is a level of disruption in many, many places. However, you can choose to look at it as that, oh no, this is destroying my industry. What am I going to do? And instead say, okay, this is disrupting my industry. What can I do to either make myself relevant or upskill, or what can I do to make sure it's not disrupting me? And that was just another reinforcement of as we're in this time of change where we do have a lot more agency to career by design instead of career by default, it all rolls back to the perspective with which we carry through and the lens that we look in life. The future of work isn't just about technology. It isn't just about being an AI-enabled humans on purpose. It's how we as humans respond to change, technical or otherwise. And whether we choose fear, whether we choose mediocrity, whether we choose negativity, or whether we choose agency and exercise the choice that we have and look at life as how is this happening for me instead of why is this happening to me? And so as you go through this week and start this new year and really get into the swing of things, I want you to notice, where are you carrying a lens that isn't serving you? And where could you shift your perspective to potentially look at things differently, look at things potentially more positively, maybe find the bright side? Because whether you're just okay, F-I-N-E, 4-letter word fine, or miserable, you can choose whether to be miserable in a miserable situation or find joy in a different perspective. So that's what I have to offer you this week for your little dose of midweek momentum as you push through your hump day. Have a great week, and you know how to find me if I can help you career by design.